Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the channel. This Saturday is UFC 273, an amazingly stacked UFC pay-per-view card with two title fights. And in the co-main event, we have Aljamain Sterling versus Petr Yan 2. And this is going to be my full breakdown and prediction for this bantamweight unification bout. And guys, I've already done a bunch of UFC 273 prediction videos. I will link them all down in the description. But I also have a prediction video coming for the main event, Alexander Volkanovski versus the Korean Zombie. So make sure you subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss that video either. And I do UFC prediction videos every single week. So you look at this fight, and this is a very important fight for the bantamweight division, which is my personal favorite division in all the UFC. I think it's the most talented division in all the UFC. It is just so stacked. There's so many great guys even outside of the rankings. It's unbelievable. It's deeper than any division. But over the past year or so, we haven't really had full clarity to the bantamweight division because you have Aljamain Sterling who, won a title off a disqualification in a fight that he was losing. We're going to talk more about that fight in a little bit. And then you have Petr Yan, who a lot of people consider the best 135-pounder in the world, as interim bantamweight champion. It feels very strange. And finally, this fight has been rescheduled. It was supposed to happen, last October. It was rescheduled. We're finally getting the rematch that we've all wanted since back at UFC 259 in March of 2021. And we finally get to, find out who really truly belongs as the undisputed bantamweight champion. I know a lot of people feel that Aljamain Sterling is a paper champion, and I know he was losing the fight, but we never got the true finality of a Petr Yan decision or of a Petr Yan TKO in the late rounds. We just never got it. So it's just such a weird place to be in a division. And I am so excited for this fight. This might be my personal favorite fight on the card just because I want to see the bantamweight division move along because it is just so good and so talent rich. And this is an important fight for both guys. If Petr Yan loses this fight somehow, I don't know where he goes from there. And if Aljamain Sterling loses this fight, he could arguably be down 0-2 to Petr Yan. And I think a lot of people are going to consider him down 0-2, even though he technically has the one win off of the DQ. So if you look at the tail of the tape for this fight, you have Aljamain Sterling is 32, Petr Yan is 29, Sterling is 5'7", so is Yan. Sterling has a 71-inch reach, and Yan has a 67-inch reach. So a little bit of a reach advantage for Aljamain Sterling, but that's about it. Everything else is, both are very young guys. Both guys are arguably in their prime. Both guys are the same height. So a little bit of a reach advantage for Aljamain Sterling. You look at Aljamain Sterling's resume, and he's fought a lot of great guys. He's currently on a 6-fight win streak, a decision win over Brett Johns, a submission win over Cody Stamann, a decision win over Jimmy Rivera, a decision win over Pedro Munoz. The most impressive win of Aljamain Sterling's entire career, in my personal opinion, is the Corey Sandhagen win back at UFC 250, which was June of 2020. And in the first round, he just immediately shot a double leg on Corey Sandhagen, ended up getting the back of Corey Sandhagen and choking him out with a rear naked choke. And to do that against a guy as high level as Corey Sandhagen was just so impressive. You look back down his resume a little bit more, you can see some of these losses he has. He has a brutal KO loss to Marlon Moraes, which was just so brutal. It was a head kick, but the knee of Marlon Moraes landed and just stiffened Aljamain Sterling up. He has a win over former featherweight champion Renan Barão, but that really hasn't aged too well. Even at the time, it wasn't all that good. He has a split decision loss to Rafael Sunsao, split decision loss to Brian Caraway. So really, his only real super definitive loss was to Marlon Moraes. A lot of people were very high on Aljamain Sterling as he was making his way up the bantamweight division. And he's been in the UFC for so long. He's been in the UFC since 2014. So 8 years Aljamain Sterling has been fighting in the UFC, which is just absolutely insane. We're going to talk about his most recent fight against Petr Yan at UFC 259. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But you look at Petr Yan, he hasn't even really been in the UFC for that long. He's only been in the UFC for 4 years. His first fight in the UFC was in September, or actually June of 2018. So that's just insane to me. Not even 4 years in the UFC. And Petr Yan is a guy that I saw early. I just saw him coming. There's very few guys that I see fight not the highest of high competition, and I say this guy has the potential to be a future champion, a future title contender, and I saw that with Petr Yan. He just looks so good in some of his fights. The Douglas Silva de Andrade, the John Dodson fight, the Jimmy Rivera fight, the Uriah Faber fight. And I know that Uriah Faber was past his prime, but to go out there and just brutalize a known guy like Uriah Faber, who was still fairly skilled, to go out there and then brutally finish him with a head kick was unbelievable. And then obviously you can debate this a little bit, but I think the best win on his resume is after, so Henry Cejudo came up and won the belt off of Marlon Moraes it was the vacant bantamweight title. And then Henry Cejudo defended against Dominic Cruz on short notice, and then he retired. It was a negotiating tactic with the UFC. But once the belt was vacated, the UFC decided the two best 135-pounders was Petr Yan and Jose Aldo. And I am very high on Jose Aldo. And Jose Aldo has looked so incredible at bantamweight. Even though a lot of people said, how is he going to do this cutting all this weight? He's going to look terrible and he's going to get KO'd. Jose Aldo has looked incredible at bantamweight. And to this day, he still looks great at bantamweight. And they booked them for the vacant bantamweight title after Cejudo retires. And he went out there and put on an absolute clinic against Jose Aldo. It was very competitive early. That's how a lot of Petr Yan's fights go. They're very competitive early. And then as the fight goes on, he makes adjustments. His opponent starts to get a little fatigued. And he just starts to pick them apart. And the finish by Petr Yan against Jose Aldo was one of the most brutal finishes I've ever seen in my entire life. I don't remember who the referee was, but I don't know what they were watching. They made Petr Yan throw about 200 heavy ground and pound punches before they finally pulled him off Jose Aldo. But to do that to a guy like Jose Aldo in the late rounds, it was in the 5th round, just showed what kind of cardio he had, what kind of skill he had, because Jose Aldo to this day is one of the best fighters in the world. And Petr Yan went out there and just brutalized him in that 4th and 5th round. It was incredible to watch. I was actually really sad because I'm a huge Jose Aldo fan. But for Petr Yan to do that, I think that is his best win in his MMA career. Then he has the loss to Aljamain Sterling. We're going to talk about that in a second. His most recent fight was at UFC 267 against Corey Sandhagen. He was originally supposed to fight Aljamain Sterling. It was supposed to be the rematch. Aljamain Sterling had to have a surgery on his neck of some sort, so that fight got postponed. But the UFC wanted to keep Petr Yan on the card, so they booked him against Corey Sandhagen. I think it was on like 3 weeks' notice, 4 weeks' notice. Booked him against Corey Sandhagen. And I remember I made a video when this happened, and I said UFC 267 just got better. Because for me, the best fight that you could make in the bantamweight division, regardless of titles, was Petr Yan versus Corey Sandhagen. I thought those guys would just be an incredible matchup. And he went out there, he fought Corey Sandhagen. Very competitive fight, but as the rounds went on, just started to take over, and he just was looking really good in the 4th and 5th round, 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. It was a competitive fight, but it was just Petr Yan doing what Petr Yan does. He's very defensively sound and just using his leg kicks and all his tools that he has to defeat Corey Sandhagen. And what a great fight. I know Corey Sandhagen came in on short notice, so you got to cut him a little bit slack. But a very good win by Petr Yan. And that's an opponent in common that he has with Aljamain Sterling. Okay, now before we get into the prediction, let's talk about what happened in the first fight between Petr Yan and Aljamain Sterling. So I went back and rewatched this fight. I think a lot of people have a warped sense of what went down at UFC 259. So I feel like the most common thoughts when it comes to UFC 259 is basically that Petr Yan was beating the brakes off Aljamain Sterling, and for whatever reason he had a mind lapse and he forgot the rules and he threw an illegal knee and got DQ'd and lost the belt via DQ. That's partially true, but I think there's a lot of context that people forgot as time went on, just because it's so easy. There's so many fights, it's easy to forget. What happened in that fight? That was a very competitive fight, especially in the 1st and 2nd round. And I believe that Aljamain Sterling won the 2nd round. I think Petr Yan won the 1st, 3rd, and was going to win the 4th. and it looked like he was on the path. He had the momentum to potentially get a stoppage, but Aljamain Sterling was crowding Petr Yan early, throwing a lot of volume, but Petr Yan, being defensively sound as he is, was blocking a lot of the shots. As the fight went on, Aljamain Sterling started to get a little bit tired. The takedowns came very labored, and Petr Yan's takedown defense was looking incredible, stuffing the takedowns. And as he started to get tired, the volume was not there anymore. The pressure was not there anymore. And once that volume and pressure was gone for Aljamain Sterling, Petr Yan started to really settle in. We know Petr Yan is a little bit of a slow starter. He starts to, get reads on his opponents and then really starts to come alive in that third, fourth, and fifth round. And that's really what he started to do. He really started to light Aljamain Sterling up, particularly in that third and fourth round. It looked like he was well on his way to a finish. He didn't hurt Aljamain Sterling or anything really badly in that fourth round, but it just looked like the writing was on the wall and Aljamain Sterling was going to get finished. And then I think Aljamain Sterling came in on a takedown. It was easily stuffed by Petr Yan. And then for whatever reason, he's sitting there kind of pausing a little bit in this weird stalemate position. He throws the illegal knee. And regardless of your thoughts on whether or not Aljamain Sterling was acting or not, was he really hurt that bad? I'm going to give you my thoughts here in a second. Petr Yan has to have the fight IQ that you cannot knee a downed opponent to the head. And it was just a terrible mistake. It was a stupid mistake. And at the end of the day, it is what it is. I guess Aljamain Sterling gets the belt because of that. It sucks. It's a crappy situation. But my initial thoughts were that Petr Yan should have known better and should not have thrown it. As much as I wanted to blame Aljamain Sterling, Petr Yan should have known better. And, my personal opinion, I think Aljamain Sterling was clearly milking it. He looked like he was going to be all right. And then the referee, which I don't even know why he's telling the doctor this. The doctor has no bearing on it. He's just there to check and make sure the fighter's ready. He has no bearing on the decision that the referee makes based on, point deductions, DQ, whatever. He tells the doctor right in front of Aljamain Sterling. He says, look, if he can't continue, it's a DQ because I told Petr Yan right before he threw the knee that Aljamain Sterling was down. All of a sudden, Aljamain Sterling starts flailing back. He starts blinking really hard. Don't get me wrong, he took a hard knee, but come on. We've seen Ben Askren get up quicker after the Jorge Masvidal flying knee. We've seen guys get stiffened up. And I know everyone's different, and it is what it is. Petr Yan should not have thrown it, but Aljamain Sterling was definitely acting after the fact. I think he probably could have continued. I don't blame him for not continuing. Petr Yan should not have thrown the technique. But it was just overall just a terrible situation. And one more thing I want to tell you guys before I get into my prediction for this fight. Going into that original fight, I thought that if Aljamain Sterling wanted to win, I thought he would have to out-grapple Petr Yan, take him down, control him on the ground, beat him up on the ground, look for submissions, but potentially win a decision just by out-grappling him. And that was insane. Petr Yan showed that he had the better grappling skills in that fight. He was taking Aljamain Sterling down. He was stuffing all Aljamain Sterling's takedowns. And Petr Yan's takedown defense and sprawls in the Sterling original fight at 259 was so good. There was a couple times there was almost headbutts because he read Sterling's takedown so fast that he was already in on the sprawl and almost butted heads with him multiple times. Okay, so for my prediction for this fight, I am going to go Petr Yan via fourth round TKO. I think it's going to be a little bit similar fight to the original one. I think Aljamain Sterling may pace himself a little bit because in that first, second round, a little bit of the third, Aljamain Sterling came out throwing crazy volume, but a lot of it was being blocked and a lot of it was hitting air as well. And I know it looked great because he's just throwing so many strikes, so many kicks, but a lot of it was not landing. Petr Yan is so defensively sound. Not a lot of it was landing. There was a couple step-in knees that were landing for Aljamain Sterling. And I think that in this fight, I think he might kind of tame that back a little bit because he started to really get tired in that late third round, early fourth round. I don't think that is a strategy to win a 5-round fight. I think Aljamain Sterling, if he wants to win this fight, I think Aljamain Sterling has to win by KO. I think he has to crowd him. I think he has to land, maybe one of those jumping step-in knees or maybe a big right hand or a head kick. I think that's how he has to win. or he can try to take the little bit more patient, path and maybe just try to land volume on him, but not as crazy, and potentially eke out a decision. I do not see Aljamain Sterling out-grappling him in this fight. We've seen too much from Petr Yan in the Corey Sandhagen fight, as well as the original Sterling fight. I just don't see it happening. Petr Yan is so good in the clinch. He has such fast reaction times on stuffing takedowns. He has great trips. He's just so good everywhere and so well-rounded. I just don't see a path of Aljamain Sterling taking him down and holding him down and or submitting him. It would have to be a very weird scramble where maybe he kicks the leg out from underneath him. Petr Yan's in a weird position. Maybe he snatches up a rear naked choke, but I really don't see that happening to Petr Yan. I think Aljamain Sterling has to get the knockout. I do not see Aljamain Sterling winning a decision. I do not see him getting a submission on Petr Yan, and I really don't see... I don't even really see the knockout, but I think that's the most likely scenario for Aljamain Sterling to win. Petr Yan is just so good, and it sounds weird saying that he has a high fight IQ when he's throwing knees to downed opponents, but he has such a high fight IQ. He has great stamina. We've seen that his output can continue for 5 rounds because he's so patient. And as the fight goes on, he starts a little bit slow, but as he starts to get these reads, he really starts to take over a fight. And we have to take into account that Petr Yan has already been in there with Aljamain Sterling for roughly 20 minutes. He has an idea of how Aljamain Sterling fights. He has an idea of the timing. It's not unfamiliar, territory. He might start a little bit faster. Maybe he gets a 3rd round TKO. But I think the fight's going to be very competitive early. I think Aljamain Sterling is going to be a little bit more patient in his volume, not try to gas himself out like he did in the first fight. I think he's going to look for better time shots, but I think Petr Yan is going to stuff those shots. I think he's going to find trips of his own, but he's not going to follow Aljamain Sterling to the ground because Petr Yan was striking like that. He just wants to keep the fight standing, even though, Aljamain Sterling overcommits a little bit. He throws, a lot of versatile attacks. I just think Petr Yan blocks all those. He's so defensively responsible. I mean, Petr Yan is super technical. He picks his shots well. I think he will outstrike Aljamain Sterling on the feet. I think he's going to be able to stuff the takedowns. I think on some of the spinning attacks, I think Petr Yan is going to grab him in the back mount, have the body lock, take him down, just let him get back up. Maybe in that weird 50-50 position, start chopping the legs a little bit where Aljamain Sterling's laying on his back, but Petr Yan is standing. And I just don't see where Aljamain Sterling wins this fight outside of maybe a flying knee or a crazy head kick or something like that. I just don't see how he does it. But that being said, Aljamain Sterling has had over a year to prepare for Petr Yan, to look at that first fight. He's also been in there with Petr Yan for 20 minutes, and he had some success with the volume in that fight. So he can make adjustments. There's no doubt in my mind he wants to win this fight. He's going to come out with a good game plan and look to defeat Petr Yan, but I just don't see where he does it. I don't see the holes in Petr Yan's game. I mean, the jiu-jitsu looks good. He was in some positions on the ground with Aljamain Sterling in the original fight, and by no means was he ever even close to a potential submission attempt or threat from Aljamain Sterling. The striking is so crisp. The leg kicks are so crisp. The clinch work is so good by Petr Yan. There's no holes. And then on top of that, I think he has the stamina advantage. I think he has the strength advantage. He was ragdolling Aljamain Sterling a little bit in the clinch in that first fight. I think he has all those advantages. And when I see all those advantages, I just can't fathom a way that Aljamain Sterling pulls this off outside of a puncher's chance, KO, knee, like I've mentioned multiple times. I mean, Petr Yan is just so flawless in his striking. He always has his hands, tucked right at his chin, ready to block shots. He's so unorthodox. He's constantly switching stances, throwing strikes from different angles. He has such a variety of attacks. And I know Aljamain Sterling does too. Aljamain Sterling, is very unorthodox, is really throwing a lot of kicks to the body, kicks to the legs. He's switching stances as well. But his striking is nowhere near as refined and technical as Petr Yan. And these spinning attacks leave him susceptible. He shoots on sloppy takedowns. He has good jiu-jitsu. He has good submissions. And he has decent takedowns as well. But the entries to the takedowns are very telegraphed. And I just think Petr Yan, as the fight goes on, he's just going to be reading everything that Aljamain Sterling does. And I think eventually he's going to crack him with a straight right or straight left, depending on which stance he's standing in. drop Aljamain Sterling, follow him to the ground with ground and pound. But I really think Petr Yan can win this fight so many different ways. It wouldn't surprise me if Petr Yan wins via decision or even a 5th round stoppage, you know. But I have Petr Yan 4th round TKO. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to check out my other UFC 273 prediction videos. And don't forget to like the video. And thank you so much for watching.